Lesson 17, having fun. The lights have been dimmed, the popcorn is made, and hot cocoa and tea still sit, steaming in thick mugs on the table. Everyone bustles about, preparing for the evening you have been thinking about all week long. It's family game night. Your little sister is doing cartwheels in the freshly cleaned living room while your dad carefully sets up the road for the game you chose to start with. Mom is finding some music to set the mood, likely some cinematic theme soundtrack, the perfect fit for your dramatic family. Your older brother starts reminiscing about the last family game night you had. So many good memories, they almost seem to cover the little annoyances and disagreements that happened throughout the day, like a forgiving blanket. You feel inexplicably warm, happy, and peaceful. And you know that this will be a memory you will hold on to forever. Let's face it, spending time as a family isn't always perfect. With all our differences, people can rub us the wrong way. In today's culture, time spent as a family is less and less common. Family dinners are replaced with fast food in the car on the way to something, and family time is replaced with friends and events. Life is busy. It's hard to carve out intentional time to relax and enjoy the family that God has given us. Before cars zoomed on paved roads, extracurricular activities, and television and video games, the main form of having fun was hanging out as a family. It was a simpler time, but it could be just as fun. Today, we're going to explore some of the games and entertainment that could be found on a pioneer homestead and think about how it compares with today. While you listen, open your notebooking page and compare the similarities and differences of having fun in the 19th century with today.
Doll or make it out of dried corn husks. Coloring was a popular activity for all ages, but there were no colored pencils or fine-tip markers like we have today. Instead, quills were made and dipped into berry juice or ashes from the fire and used to draw on rocks and wood. When paper was available, paper dolls could be made and played with over and over again, changing out the clothing. Similar in theory to the big rubber balls you might find in a supermarket today, pioneer children also played with soft inflatable balls. However, instead of synthetic, plastic, and dyes, the balls were made by inflating a pig's bladder. Yeah. Would you be brave enough to blow that ball up? Wagon wheels and barrel hoops, pieces of flattened metal welded into a circle, could be used for all sorts of games and activities. Shadow puppets could provide hours of entertainment, especially on the long, dark evenings by the light of a candle. Animal bones and rocks could be used to play a round of knuckle bones and see who could catch the most. A stick might be transformed into a slingshot or an imaginary gun or sword. Handmade toys were enhanced by imagination and wonder. What types of games did they play? Many of the pioneer-era games used simple materials that are still available and common today, so we can enjoy many of the same things they did. As you listen to some of the games that they played, choose one or more to try as a family. There are links for some of them available on the resource page, which is linked in the front of your student notebooks in the note to the student. Jump rope. Jump rope games have been around a very long time. Many times the children would chant a rhyme or a saying while they jumped the rope. The rope could be crossed and could go very fast, and the goal was not to trip or stop your rhyme. Jump ropes could be smaller for one person to hold themselves or much longer for two people to hold on either end. It might sound easy, but jump rope took some skill and nimbleness and a lot of practice. Crack the whip. Typically playing on grass to help cushion the fall, one player was chosen to be the head of the whip and would run around randomly holding hands with the next player, who hold hands with another, etc., making a long chain. The tail of the whip, the other players connected to the head, would follow in the same direction but with more force. The longer the whip, the more powerful the movements were, and the more difficult it was to hold on. This was a fun game with no real objective other than to hold on as long as you could and enjoy pulling one another along. Take a look at this painting by Winslow Homer of children playing this game. Do you think they are having fun? I think they are. Hoop rolling. We already learned that pioneer families used the tools they had around them and repurposed wheels and barrel hoops. With these hoops, they played all sorts of games, such as rolling them down a hill and chasing them or trying to spin and keep them going with a stick. Another game was Cat's Cradle, a quiet game for 2 players. Cat's Cradle only required some simple yarn or string. One player would loop the yarn over his fingers to make a cradle, and while the other person pulled the strings off their hands without ruining it. The yarn could be passed back and forth between the 2 players and sped up to make more fun. Hide the Thimble, a simple game that didn't require a game board or special cards. Hide the Thimble just needed a sewing thimble. Players took turns hiding it in the room while everyone closed their eyes. Whoever found it first would be the one who hid it the next time.
We could do that.
Yeah. Jacob and Rachel, based on the Bible story where Rachel and Leah were veiled and Jacob didn't know which one was which. A group would stand in a circle while one person, who was it, was blindfolded in the middle. The middle person spun around so they'd lose their bearings and point their hands out. When they stopped, the person of the opposite sex closest to where they were pointing was caught, and the middle person tried to guess who it was. If they were correct, the new person was it. We are on our way out west. This is a fun game you can play today to transport yourself back to the pioneer times. It's perfect for a road trip like the trip pioneer families took so many years ago. We are on our way out west is an alphabetic game. One player starts with "We are on our way west and we are taking blank." Then they list an item that starts with the letter A. Good. The next player repeats the phrase and says an item that starts with the letter B. You then continue listing items in alphabetical order. It's a great way to reinforce the alphabet for young children, or challenge yourself and try to remember each item before adding the next one. Did you know many of the games you play today were also played by pioneer children? They played games such as tag, hide and seek, 3-legged races, hopscotch, beanbag throwing, checkers, and marbles.
How did they celebrate? Part of having fun on a homestead was as simple as doing work in the community. Building a barn could be hard labor and daunting on your own, but a time of socializing, laughter, and joy with the neighborhood coming together. From barn raisings to quilting bees, corn husking to taffy pulls, pioneers gathered whenever possible to visit, share their skills, and lighten the load. Often the women brought plates and dishes full of home-baked goodies and food to share like a giant potluck. Special holidays were eagerly anticipated by parents and children alike, who took the time to celebrate the fruits of their labor and show thankfulness for what they had been given. Many of these holidays looked different from home to home, depending upon where the family had immigrated from and what their traditions were. A Christmas tree might be cut, a Yule log burned, or special treats brought in or made. If gifts were given, they were usually handmade or very useful. Other holidays held their own traditions as well. Valentine's Day was met with paper hearts and vanity cakes. Thanksgiving brought a meal of wild goose, jackrabbit, stew, stuffing, seasoned with herbs and sausage, popcorn and stewed plums. New Year's Day was regarded by some as the most celebrated day of the year. They made spiced ale, shortbread, oatcakes, and black bun, which was like a spiced raisin pie. A fun, symbolic tradition. They opened the back door to let old year out, and then they opened the front door to welcome the new year in. Weddings were celebrated with food, family, and friends. Lavish ceremonies were held by wealthier families, while poorer families had simpler gatherings. Guests gathered to honor the young couple and gave decorative, pretty gifts rather than practical, useful ones, which could imply that the bride's father or husband could not provide for her. A wedding celebration was all about love. Young people would play games to help them meet their potential spouses. With smaller communities, matches were often made at special events and gatherings that would spark a courtship to see if the couple was well suited for each other.
Which one? What about entertainment? Music was perhaps one of the most popular forms of entertainment during pioneer times, and it was especially common during gatherings and events. Hymns and songs were sung or hummed while hanging the wash, scrubbing the floor, or chopping wood. Homemade instruments might be played in the evening around the fire. Accomplished musicians were a real treat and played their instruments or sang, attracting people far and wide to come and hear them. Even those who weren't familiar with music could read the notes and sing along. With the uniquely shaped note hymnals that were made, which allowed people to read musical tones even if they didn't know what the staff meant. Did you know violin and fiddle strings were sometimes rumored to be made with catguts, coining the term catgut strings? Roughly 300 years ago, violin strings were made from animal intestines, but it is not known if the intestines of cats were actually ever used for this purpose. Most of the time, the strings were made from a sheep's intestines. The sound coming from the strings did sound like a cat screeching, however, which is one theory behind how they got the name catgut strings. Entertainment could be found in the midst of the mundane. Darning, quilting, knitting, and whittling around the fire could be enhanced with some fiddling, singing, or telling stories. Hand shadow puppets by the dancing light of a candle could provide hours of laughter and joy. There might not have been movie theaters or video games, but where there is community, there can be fun, and pioneer families knew how to weave fun into everyday activities. You know,